Hello again, internet friends, and welcome back to another episode of Gluten-Free Cooking with Rachel Ray. This week I want to talk to you about Tony Ferguson and him inviting David Goggins into his training camp leading up to the Paddy Pimblett fight. Now, if you're not a UFC fan, Tony Ferguson is a lightweight UFC fighter. He's a big deal in the sport, and he's been fighting for a long time. And most of you guys probably know, vaguely at least, who David Goggins is. And so Tony's invited David Goggins in to do this kind of Hell Week training with him. I don't know if it lasted longer than a week or not, but they posted some videos on social media of them working out together. And as you would expect, it's some pretty intense endurance stuff. It's a lot of the stuff that David Goggins is kind of known for. A lot of body weight exercises for a lot of reps. They're running on the treadmill. They're doing the Stairmaster till they throw up, all that kind of stuff. As you can imagine, like everything else on the internet, this has generated quite a bit of conversation and discussion about, is this the best thing for Tony to be doing? Is this going to be something that's effective for him to do? And is this ultimately going to hurt him in some way going into the fight? And there's a lot of people saying in comment sections, you know, he's going to get hurt doing this, he shouldn't be doing this, that type of thing. And Paddy Pimblett, in an interview, commented on it, saying that this was not the best thing for him to be doing, especially 4 weeks away from the fight. And so I thought I'd share some thoughts with you guys and help you maybe see this through a different lens. Now, generally speaking, the kind of traditional sports science thinking is that the farther away you are from a competition, the less specific stuff you're going to do to get ready for your competition. And the closer you get to the competition, the higher the intensity is going to get and the more specific your training is going to be. And so for an MMA fighter, that would mean that a lot of the strength and conditioning stuff and some of the more varied training that you might do is going to be farther away from the fight. And as you get closer to the fight, you're staying very sports specific. You're only sparring, you're only hitting mitts, you're drilling exactly what you want to do in the fight, that sort of thing. And you're dialing it back on heavy lifting and a lot of the crazy sprinting and stuff that you might see a fighter do. And there's a lot of variation with how fighters train, but that's kind of the traditional thinking for a lot of sports coaches. And so there's two main concerns that came to my mind, and that most of the people commenting on this, including fighters and coaches, not just the comment section, seem to have. One is that he's spending so much time and so much effort doing these other things that he's not fight training, which I think is a very valid concern. And the second one is essentially he's doing so much training and it's so hard that he's going to get injured. Those are the two main concerns I see. So the first concern, which is that he doesn't have time for fight training, is correct. If he's going through this Hell Week type thing and, you know, you're going for hours of running every day and hours of calisthenics, and you're spending another hour on the Stairmaster and then on the bike, and then, you know, you not only don't have time for sparring or hitting the bag or anything like that because you just trained, you know, 6 hours of the day away, you're not going to have any energy for it. So even if he could tough it out even more and go and hit the bag or go and hit mitts or do the drills, he's going to be so exhausted that he's not going to really get anything out of that sports-specific training. And so it really derails the kind of traditional thinking of, hey, the fight's coming up, we need to be doing fight-specific stuff. We need to be sparring so that we can get your hand-eye coordination and your timing going. We need to be drilling the moves that you're going to do in the fight so that they're fresh, all that type of stuff. The second concern, which is overtraining, under-recovering, whatever you want to call it, essentially doing so much work that your body can't handle it anymore and there's some type of injury. And I think this is especially prevalent for Tony, because if you guys have been watching the UFC for a while, you'll remember about 5 years ago, Tony was set up to fight Khabib Nurmagomedov, and a week or two before the fight, it might have been the week of the fight, he got injured in a freak accident. And I remember on Joe Rogan's podcast, him kind of asking and pontificating, why did this super tough ultra endurance athlete get injured by something seemingly so harmless? Because Tony Ferguson is known notoriously for his work ethic, and he's staying in the gym for an hour or two after everybody else has left, and the coaches are trying to kick him out, but he won't leave, and he's jumping rope in the dark, and he's hitting the bag by himself before anybody else gets there. And so to Joe and to a lot of people, it's like, how could this have possibly happened? How could this guy's body have given out on him with something seemingly so small? But I think that work ethic and that pushing yourself to the limit and the constantly doing more is exactly what got him injured. Because in the last weeks of the fight camp, I think it's safe to assume most fighters are doing their hardest sparring and their hardest conditioning. And a guy like Tony, I would assume, is probably doing a lot of very intense training, and so his body is in this compromised, sensitive state because it's trying to recover from all that hard work that he's been doing, not just day to day, but the culmination of that whole training camp left his body very fatigued, and specifically his knee. And that cord that he tripped over in the Fox recording studio was just kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. That was what finally did him in. Most of the damage was done prior to that in his training camp, where he was most likely just pushing himself to the limit constantly. And he found that limit, and that limit was his knee and his knee's ability to maintain its structure. And so you can imagine very easily, when we think back to that injury, that this is potentially something that's going to happen again. If he's pushing himself to those limits again, and he's going as hard as possible for these very long periods of time with David Goggins, then he could potentially find that limit again. And, you know, it could be a shoulder, it could be a knee, who knows? But that is definitely a danger that he risks when he does something like that. And so I think a lot of the criticisms that are being leveled at Tony Ferguson doing this type of training so close to the fight are valid criticisms. But there's two things that maybe you haven't considered, and for you Tony Ferguson fans, this might offer you a little bit of hope if you're really hoping that, you know, this isn't going to mess Tony up and that he's going to win his next fight. The first thing is that he's only doing it for a week. You know, if he was doing it for 2 or 3 weeks, or he was taking a big break off of fight training and doing something like that, you'd need to be more worried. But he's only doing it for a week. He was probably doing a lot of fight training before that. He's still got 4 weeks leading up to the fight after this Hell Week thing to get back into fight-specific training. And he has been fighting for, I don't know, it's been more than a decade. I don't know how long he's been fighting, but it's certainly been more than a decade. It might even be 2 decades. And so it's not like he's going to lose all his fight skills and all his reflexes and stuff like that in a week. And so this huge concern over, you know, oh, he needs to be doing fight-specific training, yeah, it's valid. But for a guy like Tony, you know, how much is a week of non-specific fight training really going to hurt him when you have a 10, 20-year career, however long it is, under your belt? You know, how many jabs has he thrown? How many kicks has he thrown? How many guillotines has he drilled? He's not going to forget it in a week. Training lessons in a minute or less. This week we're looking at training. When we first started working together, he was a police officer that wanted to look better, be stronger, be more. He's a law enforcement officer, and when we first started working together, he wanted to be stronger, in better shape, more capable, and make the SWAT team at his department. Not only did he exceed
in that time
Since that time, he has knocked 2 minutes off his mile time, added 30 pounds to his. He did that by being very consistent with his runs. The majority of with a small portion of those workouts being higher intensity sprints or 400-meter dashes. So if you want to be capable in more than just a lifter, there is so much progress to be made by just being consistent and going on easy runs once or twice a week. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.